There's lots of things about money business I still don't understand, just because I'm not in that world. First real job was working at the Disney store, like almost $3,000 a month, which is why I had the two jobs. And I made more money doing background work. By the end of it, I was making $153 for 10 hours. Now that I'm pursuing photography for myself, because I really wanted to do the photography business to support me with acting.
Welcome to the show, Mary Kate. I'd love for you to start with a brief introduction. You give us your name, age, and where you're from.
Hi, I'm Mary Kate. I am 30, going on 31, which is terrifying. And I am now from Florida, but I'm not sure how long I will be from Florida. And I wasn't originally from Florida. I'm originally a Northeasterner, so Florida's still strange.
Where were you born originally?
I was born in Pennsylvania. I lived in Jersey until I was 9, and then we moved to like Central PA. And then I went to college in New York and stayed there for 10 years and then moved down here a little.
Nice. Where'd you go to college in New York?
Pace.
Pace. And what'd you study there?
Art history.
And what'd you do after college? What'd you get into with that degree?
Nothing. Initially. Here I was using my degree. In New York it really wasn't. I was trying to get any kind of this gallery related job. I did work at the Met briefly, but I was like not even working for the Met. I was working for the audio guy company that the Met hired, getting paid crap. And I was always like standing in the dark corner by myself, like trying to sell them, so I wasn't even really near the art. That wasn't so fun. But I was doing any kind of different day jobs. My first real job was working at the Disney store, which I learned a lot from, although also kind of unfair. Because back then minimum wage was only $9.50 in the city, which is insane.
So you're getting paid $9.50 working at Disney when you first got out of college?
Yeah.
How was that living in New York City?
I mean, I loved living there. It was a struggle, but my heart, I have like a connection just with the city. I've always loved it. As a kid, when I would sometimes, rare occasions, get to go, I love that. It's so strange to me to kind of not be living that lifestyle. And then I'll realize how spoiled I was by certain things, like having pizza around the corner that's really good at like midnight, or just even the type of swing dancing, like there's very specific style down here, and I have to like drive an hour to Fort Lauderdale to even do it. But you get so much variety of dance styles in the city. And then there's more blues, which I really like, and there's not much blues right now. I think there used to be a little bit more, and COVID killed a lot. So that's part of the problem. So I've been told anyway.
And what'd you do after, I guess, walk me through your career path after you got out of college, started working at Disney for $9.50 an hour. Where'd you go after that?
Well, I started doing background work for TV shows. So that became better money. And then I had a couple different, like, regular day jobs. But the longest one after Disney, I think, that I had was Viva Crepe, which is a creperie. And I made crepes. And I always would say crepe, and then nobody knew what I was talking about, so I started saying crepes. Because it was too exhausting to work at one and sound like the pretentious person. I was like, all right, I give up. Like, I'm going to say the name of the store correctly, and I'll start saying crepe. But I was thinking, I think I worked there for 3 years, give or take. And that stopped because of COVID. I got laid off, and I didn't have a choice, there was nobody going out for food. And then I ran away briefly to Florida for 6 months while paying my rent up in the city.
Oh, wow.
Living with my mom and working at CVS down here while getting the pandemic assistance stuff. And then after 6 months, I went back. And then one of my roommates she had left too, and decided not to come back. Then the lease, so me and my other man had to find a new place, and that was a big hassle. And then I transferred to a CVS up there just because it was convenient, and these jobs were so kind of scarce at the time. And I knew that was something I could get, having already been doing that down here. And I originally started working at one that was close to our current apartment. And when we moved, I had to start, putting to get on the train again to get to work. And that was a long year's worth of stuff. And then, this COVID stuff, I decided to leave New York at the end of that lease. And then I came here. And I've been here since Christmas of 2021.
Okay, so you moved out of New York for good in winter of 2021.
Yeah.
And what'd you start doing when you moved to Florida? And what part of Florida are you in?
I'm in South Florida in West Palm, familiar Palm Beach, which is kind of close to Fort Lauderdale. I was working in Renton at an auction house for a year. which I did enjoy in general. And that's when I was finally using my art degree, which was nice. Like, hey, I know things I can contribute. And I was writing the catalog, and I was photographing the catalog. That was new to me. And he had an older DSLR camera. And like now, the thing is, I've now learned more about cameras in general since I've stopped working there. Now that I'm pursuing photography for myself, so it's kind of ironic because I only needed to know so much for that job. And now I'm like, I could have made this so much easier if I had just known how to do these things with the camera for that whole year. But he didn't know that much either. So I just kind of was, I've learned a little bit on my own. Like we had started a whole new lighting setup and he figured out kind of what to do with that. But then I figured out why it wasn't working. And I learned in general from that, plus office stuff and whatnot. I still had to, still, even though I was having a regular full-time job for the first time in my life, I have all these extra bills, and now I'm living alone because some people can afford to live here alone. Depending, I had one of the cheaper apartments, but I was still paying more than what my rent was in New York because I'm by myself. And now I have a car payment because I didn't need a car in the city. So then I got all those expenses and the car insurance, which is like $4,000 a year. I'm like, oh my God, why is car insurance so expensive? I know I've never had a car before, but I'm 30 years old, damn it, and I know how to drive a car. This isn't fair. So, like, I have all these extra bills despite the fact that I was making money,
And
like,
so,
more than I ever was. But I still needed a second job and worked at a restaurant too, and worked 6 days a week.
so when you were in the full time job in the art gallery in Florida, how much were you making there?
I started off at 15 an hour, which for me is bare minimum because that's what I would make in New York. Even though here that's more than the minimum wage, but still. And then by the end of it, I was making 17 an hour.
17 an hour. And what was your take home pay a year or a month on that? Were you working 40 hours a week?
Yeah, except when we have an auction. So then I would get an extra 8 hours of work usually. But
Okay.
there were 2 months where we had 2-day auctions, so I got more, and that was much stressful too because there's just so much more to do. But those couple months, a little extra. But at first it was like every other month we have an auction, and then eventually we were up to like every month, 2 months. So in general, 40 hours a week plus a little something.
So for general 40 hours a week, I guess that's about $35,000 a year gross. But then obviously you have a couple extra hours you're picking up with different auctions and stuff here and there. What was your apartment rent when you were doing this?
The rent itself was 1,300 plus, utilities and everything else.
That definitely would have been. I mean, if you're grossing 35,000 a year, probably taking home a little over 2,000 a month with 1,300 of that going towards rent probably wasn't the easiest thing to be doing right there.
No, I did a budget, and my budget was like I needed to make like almost $3,000 a month, which is why I had the two jobs. And even
Mm.
that was just fading by. I wasn't really saving any money. And I used a lot of what I had saved to get down here anyway with the move. It cost an extra $1,000 and they lost my box and I'm still pissed off about that. Which is why every time I have to move, it's like triggering trauma because something always goes wrong.
Moving, it's stressful. It costs a lot of money, and it never goes according to plan. No matter where you're going, especially doing a cross country road trip or moving from New York down to Florida. I mean, that's a 12, 15, 18 hour drive, depending on what part of Florida you're going to. So it's a lot.
It was, and just packing. It takes me if I'm not working, it could take even like a month to pack, Like I had the last 2 weeks that wasn't working before I moved to finish packing. And then my apartment had mold issues, which they tried treating it once. I tried to ignore what symptoms I had because they had lessened after the treatment. But then those last 2 weeks I was packing, like kept getting sick. And now a lot of my stuff's ruined because of that. So that's another stressful thing. It's like next time I move, I'm gonna bring these contaminated boxes and some stuff wherever I'm going, which is gonna contaminate where I live. And I can't really afford to like get plastic bins for every box that I had. And then I got the brand new mattress and furniture, and like I spent what would have been a $700 dry cleaning bill on my clothes that I couldn't wash just to try to, because just them being in the apartment It's crazy. Like I haven't washed some of my clothes that are still in the storage unit now. And when you open it up, it has this crazy smell that I had apparently got accustomed to. And now I smell it. I'm like, oh yeah, that's what that smelled like.
Oh wow. And so you're keeping on those clothes. You're keeping those clothes, even though they're in storage right now. You're not using them. And they smell bad.
Yeah, I have to wash them. It's more than God. I've got, how big is it? It's about 15 by something. But there is some room in it in the front to maneuver, so I got a bigger one. But I mean, like I've got a lot of stuff. Like I got a piano. I've got a 55-inch TV, which is not getting thrown away. At least that's not that you can wipe down. You know, that's not contaminated.
Mm-hmm.
But like
So
a brand new mattress and better.
let's dive in. I'm curious where, I guess, so you grew up in New Jersey, you said. What was your childhood like?
Lonely sometimes because like we lived in neighborhoods that didn't really have kids. So like I had my one best friend who lived 40-ish minutes away in PA when I was really young. And then I had one friend in middle school. But then I had a rough time in first and second grade. Well, at first grade was okay, but second grade I had a rough time with, with learning with some of my like OCD and stuff. So that and other things inspired us to move away. And we moved to Pennsylvania to a wellness school. So I could go there, which helped considerably. But it was less lonely. And then with the same kids each year and the same teacher, like literally the same class. So that's a completely different structure. And it's very creative and artsy and kind of pagan too, which I didn't really realize until I got older. But this is like basically a pagan school. It's cool to have different, learn different cultures and different beliefs and, whatnot. I miss the Native American stuff. That would have been fun for first and second grade. I didn't get there until third grade. And then, I went to the public school in Wrightsville, which is a pretty decent public school. We had a good arts program, which is important to me because, acting and singing is crucial to my spiritual existence and whatnot. So that was kind of my childhood. Got more friends and some
And out of the places you've lived between Pennsylvania, New Jersey, New York, Florida, where's your favorite place to live out of those?
New York,
New York. What part of the city did you live in when you were there?
mostly Harlem.
Okay.
Twice like the Washington Heights, but I always lived in that area. So I wanted to live in Manhattan, and that's the only way you can afford it if you don't have money.
Yeah, I think median rent for one bedroom or studio is $3,500 or $4,000 a month right now. So if you're in Manhattan, so it's crazy.
I've lived in a studio for 3 years. It was funny. I didn't realize how much money I was spending on dorming in school. Like once I then saw what rent is, and you're sharing a tiny room with one person. But yeah, my first studio was around 1450 because it was in Harlem and before things really started going up. And then I realized, oh, I can't afford this.
And that was when you were making $9.50 an hour at Disney.
Yeah.
So that would have been very, very tough to be able to be affording that then, if not impossible.
Because the only reason why I could was because and my parents had saved up a large sum of money for me to use for either college or whatever I wanted. And so most of that went to college and I still had some left over. So I think the only reason why I was able to do that for a time was because I was still using the leftovers to actually live and just using the other account to save up what I was making. And eventually, I had to switch over and then after started using what I had made in the last several years. And the minimum wage kept going up, thank God. And I made more money doing background work. And by the end of it, I was making 153 for 10 hours for most shoots.
Mm-hmm.
But some shoots had a little less for 8 hours, but then after 8 hours, we started making overtime for non-union. So it's a whole different kind of structure. But yeah, if you worked any overtime, you could come out with a decent check.
So as you were growing up, how did your parents approach money, and did they ever talk about money with you? Outside of obviously when you're going to college, they talked about it and said, "Hey, we had this set aside for your college." Did they talk much about money as you're growing up, and what did you learn from them growing up?
Yeah, I mean, I was always very conscious of what money meant to my family, I guess. My dad owned his own business, so I understood the concept of being frugal and just being wise with your money. But I also grew up with it, because they had money, which is a big switch once I, was on my own. It's funny, I regret it now. My dad would pay me like $100 a month just to check the messages on his answering machine for his business line. And then I stopped doing it. And it's like, cause it's just like, I have like this block about not wanting to do certain kinds of like work I didn't want to do. And I was always very aware of what growing up could mean and the stresses that would be. So I never wanted to do anything that felt like growing up. And now I'm like, oh my God, I could have had a whole grand there, just for working for 10 months if I wanted. If I had just paid more attention, wow, that would have come in handy if I had not slacked on that, and stopped making it. That was like my little allowance for that. But the thing is, I didn't even really need like an allowance because there was nothing to do where I lived. So it's not like, oh, I need money to go do something. I had everything I needed. Like I had a large room type suite thing once we moved to PA and we built the house. And I had like a bedroom and then like the separate room, which had all my toys and stuff in it. And then I'm getting older and I have my TV. And I had just everything I needed there. And you have to drive to get anywhere where I lived. So now that I'm not with my friends from my old school, like we have to have parents involved to bring us to do something. So once I'm in high school, and so just so making friends, and that was so kind of lonely too, to an extent. And then even when we do have people, like there's nowhere to go. So I didn't need money to do anything.
So what'd you do with your allowance and the money you're making answering the phone?
They set up an M&T account for me, and I was putting it in there. So that's what I did with it. But I didn't need an account. And I guess once in a while, I would want to buy something. Like if we were going to the Renaissance Fair, like a fairy festival, or if we were going on a vacation, then I'd want money to do something. And they'd usually end up giving me something anyway, though. So like it depended on how old I was or whatnot. But like my birthday's like 6 months from Christmas, so I always got a lot of stuff between my parents and my mom's large Irish family. So I usually got a lot of what I wanted on my Christmas and birthday list. So I didn't even like have to think about, I want to work up to get this thing because I just had a lot.
Yeah.
So I didn't want like the grind to get something. It's not like I was spoiled rotten or anything. I was just privileged with lots of family members.
Family members that bought all your birthday presents and gifts, and you didn't need to spend your money on that. So
it's sort of a long one. I don't know, but
did your parents talk about money with you growing up outside of the allowance? Like, did they ever talk about how much things cost or how much X, Y, and Z, or like teach you about money?
Yes, and indirectly, like I was aware of like how much things cost. Like I was always really aware of every time they were selling a house or buying something. Like when my dad bought, I was in high school when he bought a house in Vegas. He was actually kind of just asking me my opinion on things, just to get a different perspective. And like, just ask somebody young who was intelligent. There's a thing about buying something in Hawaii, and I agree with it. People like this is not a good idea, and versus the cost of things. And so, yeah, I just can't really give like a lot of good examples, but I know I wasn't like oblivious to the world and how things were, because I was very aware of conversations about, oh, this is this and it's going to happen here, and this is how much this house is going to cost now, and this is how much the flight is, and stuff like that. And I knew how much groceries were, I guess.
Did they ever talk about saving or investing or their retirement plans or like 401ks with you?
Like I knew saving and investing was a thing, and I was aware of what CDs were to an extent. And like I knew I had the E-Trade account. So it's like yes and no. Like there's lots of things about money business I still don't understand, just because I'm not in that world. I've never worked in that world. But they both do, because they both work in insurance, and then he started his own business, so they get a lot. So I wasn't like naive, but definitely not. I couldn't be thrown into a business situation and necessarily be able to hold my own, but I could compare. I think it was more like I understood housing. I understood housing in places.
Yeah. What ways do you think, like how your parents, how they spent money, how they kind of taught you about money? How do you think that kind of shaped your financial habits as you went through college, as you went through live in New York City? How do you think that affected you?
I mean, I was very aware now of what it takes to survive. So I never had to do that or worry about that because my family never worried about that as when I was alive. I mean, they worried about that before I was around. They had all their struggles and they didn't come from money at all. But I never felt that. And they still helped me even when I did have, you know, trouble sometimes. Or here's a big gift for this Christmas. And this give me a lot for Christmas here. They're kind of on the side. But I mean, I think it hindered me and I think it would have been better. It would have been beneficial if I had had a job of some kind in high school. So I could have learned early on, oh, I don't want this to be my life, you know? When you learn the kind of crap jobs you have
Yeah.
and stuff. I didn't start doing that when I went to college or right after college. I did work a little internship. It was actually for my dad's business, but he didn't hire me. Our friend did convince my dad. And I didn't work with my dad because that would have been stressful. So I worked with Justin, who was great. So I got something there for like one summer. Basically, like I got hired at IHOP, and then they had 3 of us on the register in a couple of days, and somebody was either stealing or messing up terribly, and they just fired all 3 of us. I'm like, well, that's great, because you don't have your crap together. Like, now we're all screwed. It's like, I know I'm not stealing. So that was like my first job for a month, and then got the internship, and then it felt like my first real job was the Disney store, as in the city. Because now I'm moving here full time. That's coming home for the summer.
Yeah, I'd love to dive in. I mean, when you graduated college, started working at the Disney store, getting paid $9.50 an hour. What was your plan? Did you even, I guess, were you thinking about the finances at that time? Were you stressed? Like, what was going through your mind in that time when you're working a job at the Disney store and living in New York City?
Well, I was really depressed at the time because I had broken up with a very not great boyfriend. So I was still kind of reeling from that
Mm-hmm.
and having to be the chipper Disney person, which I am good at doing. But I don't think they realized how much is actually going on with me. And we didn't get the credit for that.
Yeah.
But I liked working there because I loved Disney. I was also very aware of how corporate they were, which I knew going in. I'd heard things, and like I always knew Disney loved the money. And I still like the company. I still love going to Disney World. I still like their content, although like some things are kind of going down lately. Although I saw Guardians. I was happy with Guardians. I was like, I'm done. This didn't suck. I was waiting for that movie for a while.
I haven't seen it yet. I need to watch it.
It was good. It's the best one since Spider-Man. If you've seen the rest of the MCU stuff that's come out. So I wasn't as fantastic as the first 2. I think the second one of the Freedoms are my favorite for Guardians. But there's a lot of emotional moments. I can get on a tangent. I won't do that, but yeah, it was good. Talking about Disney stress. So I knew I wasn't going to run out of money, and I knew I was still okay because I had at least, I don't even know how much money I had left over, but I had a decent sum.
Was it roughly 25,000? Was it 50? Was it 100?
But when I first graduated, the math would make me think somewhere between 50 or 30. But I don't know I don't know if that's right. Because if I spent that on college, not more than 50, maybe 30, then that dwindled.
That dwindled quick with living in New York City, working at the Disney store.
It affected me in that, like, I wouldn't go out and do a lot because my brother really had a good impact on me with, you shouldn't, if you don't, just because I have this money over here, doesn't mean I should just be spending it. So I tried to live by at least by the time things evened out, I tried to just live with what was there. But I knew I had some extra stuff that I could do things sometimes and have some kind of a life. But I didn't enjoy my 20s as I probably should have. But I think a lot of people say that.
I mean, it's probably difficult living in New York City, paying $1,400 or $1,300 a month in rent.
I started off at 14, and then it went up to like 14.50, and then he was going to raise it to 15. I'm like, I can't afford it. Sorry.
Yeah, I mean, it's. I would say it's difficult to enjoy going to nice restaurants or going to performances on Broadway or going to different museums and paying for that when you're making $9.50 an hour living in New York City, which is very, very expensive to live in.
Yeah,
housing and everything else on top of that. So I can imagine, I mean, looking back, I mean, a lot of people probably say, yeah, I could have spent more. I could have enjoyed my 20s more, 30s, whatever age that might be. But when you're in a financial crunch like that, it's definitely not easy to go splurge and spend money on things that you can't afford if you have that in the back of your mind, which sounds like you're at least thinking about that during that time that, hey, I can't just go spend all my money on everything. And
Yeah, it's not like I had space for stuff either.
let's dive into kind of what you're doing now, what your current income is, what your current job is, and we'd love to talk more about that.
Well, right now, the only job I have, I've lost all the other jobs I had here, which just sucks. But that also kind of spurred me to say, screw it, I don't want, and it's not just I don't want to work for a 9 to 5, but I realize I think I'm just gonna, no matter, even if I like it, I'm gonna get jaded if it's too repetitive. And I want to create. This is why I'm starting a photography business, which is incredibly daunting. And the money I'm using for that is coming from a couple years ago. Apparently, there was an insurance policy for me on my dad, and they're like, we can't afford to keep paying it out every year, so we can either do it or take the money. I'm like, well, I can't afford the $2,000 a year to do it, so I took the money. That was before I left the city, and I used that to get my new laptop like 5 years ago, and I did use like $1,000 of that to take a trip to Paris, which I don't regret, actually, because I hadn't seen my friend in a while, and it was a great trip. I mean, that was the year before COVID, so I could have, everything got screwed if I hadn't done that. But I'm using some of that money to buy the camera and the camera equipment so far that I've done, and I've put some of that into my Wells Fargo account to help with it. But I wanted to get a Chase account. I wanted to get a business account. I wanted to get a business card, but I can't decide on the name because the name that I want, like I wanted a word that meant create, but in a different language, and then photography and art. But I wanted it to be like, I really wanted it to be in Irish from my ancestry. And the word that meant create was like crocha, but it doesn't even look like that. And like, nobody would understand that. So I thought if I did like artist, which is Eliantor, but most people seem to still not get it when they read it. So I can't start getting an account for it and make things separate and easy to understand until I pick a name, or at least with the credit card I can.
I have a few questions on this on a dive into.
Before, I do have some income. I'm working at a market once a week in the for unemployment. So I do have something as well, and I just had an interview to get another restaurant job, but and that answers your question.
And how much are you making at that market once a week?
150.
150 for that day that you're working?
Yeah, because now it's only one day, and then they have the unemployment stuff, which actually cuts into it because they ask you the number what you're making before taxes. So I'm losing like 20 or 30 bucks from that, and but I get like a couple hundred a week from that. But it's only like you only get that every 2 weeks.
What happened with your previous jobs? You said you got fired from all your jobs that you had previously in Florida?
Yeah, this is my full-time job. Without trying to bash some things.
You don't say any names or anything. I'm just like the industry is in. Was it being a server, a hostess? Was it working at a retail shop?
It depended on the job.
Mm-hmm.
Like for the full-time one, it ended up not being a great environment, and I was kind of fed up with it. And I think I could have done some things better too, but I felt like I was kind of getting pushed out a little bit from someone else who had come in who was close with my boss. It's me, my boss, and someone close to him.
Mm-hmm.
So it just was not. I was sick of getting talked to that way, and I kind of stood up for myself, and then was asked to leave. And I know it was more than that. I think he told me he was displeased with certain things as I'm telling him this, even though I just asked for a raise like a couple weeks before. I didn't really mention them what he wanted me to do. So I think it was time to leave, and I'm kind of glad.
How much were you making on that job?
That was ended up being 17.
17 an hour.
And then the restaurant jobs, the first restaurant job I had, not unprofessional environment, but the type of restaurant wasn't the best environment for me. And they had new management, and I was getting less shifts, and they were very corporate. And me working less and less, it was hard for me could do what they wanted and remember everything at that point. And then I got like shopped by corporate, and some of it I think I know is true, that I did mess up on a really bad day because I remember it now. But they said I didn't do some of the things I always do on their corporate crap. And so I'm like, now I some of it was even fine. And so that was gone. They were still willing to give me a recommendation, which is good, because the new manager who finally became the new store manager is a nice person. And I worked at this other restaurant. And then I got fired from that because I had a table who turned out to be friends with the owner. And despite the fact he specifically said he was happy with me and still tipped me and was pissed about everything else that went wrong in the restaurant, he complained about the experience with the owner I've never met. And I got fired in a text, and they still owe me money. So, and they're not responding to me there. And I'm like, this is great. And I'm like, I'm not, and you start questioning yourself. And I'm like, I haven't been fired aside from the first IHOP incident when I was like 20 and they didn't have their shit together. Sorry, IHOP. But like, I've never had these kind of problems. And it's like the universe is trying to kick me out of Florida, I think. Because, I don't know, it just doesn't, it's insane.
So how long ago did those different occurrences happen between the two restaurants and the other job that you're asked to leave at?
The first restaurant happened in like the summer.
In 2022?
Yeah. And then I started working for the other restaurant while also working at the full-time job. And then that he let me go in January. And then like 2 weeks later, the restaurant let me go. So it was all like in the same month as I was moving out, like, and moving into my parents' place to begin with, because I was living in the moldy apartment, which they were also turning into a vacation rental, so I had to go anyway. So that's also, I think, universe trying to push me out of a toxic, physically toxic environment. And I was originally just going to save up a couple months and figure out a new apartment to go to since I had my job. And then when I lost that, it's like, okay, now I'm moving in to figure out if I'm going to stay in this state or not.
Yeah, so that's obviously a lot that happened over the course of a short time with those different jobs. What have you been doing since January 2023? You were moving out. The restaurant job and the full-time job both ended. What have you been doing since then to make money, or have you been applying to jobs?
Acting stuff. Yeah, I've been applying to different acting gigs that are in the area, and I've had several. I've started doing. There's just one company that's like 3 hours away that shoots underwater horror films. I've been working for them, which I very much enjoy.
And how much you making a month doing the acting stuff?
It's varied because they're all like kind of one-time gigs. I mean, they're recurring, but it's like once a month. So with them, I've done 3 shoots and made 160 each time. And then I just did a short film, which I just 100? No, it was 100 something. No, it was 90 for 2 days, so it ended up being 180. So once the tolls and gas driving to Miami and everything, that whole week, because I ended up doing those 2 shoots and the underwater shoot. It was like $60 in gas for that, doing all of that. So that's why I felt like I ended up making 120 essentially from that one gig. And then I just went to Miami for another gig, which was $100, but again, gas. So it's a little less than 100. But now I have more recent footage that I can use. I still have to get it from them, but I can use it for my reel because my reel is pretty old. I still have my glasses on, and I was like 22 in that.
So it's really a couple $100 a month that you're making right now from the acting stuff.
Yeah, pretty much.
And are you applying to any other full-time jobs or any other restaurants in the area or any other local businesses, retail, so you can make more money?
Interview with a restaurant Saturday, 2 days ago. My mom and I were somewhere and just asked them if they were hiring because it seemed like it had a good menu, expensive, but not so upscale that it couldn't still be personable with people. And it went well, and he said he'd get back to me on Wednesday. I don't know how many shifts I'll end up having, but right now, anything's good, you know?
Yeah.
Since I still have expenses, but I don't have rent, at least. So that's okay for now. Especially if I think if I end up leaving and moving to like Atlanta or something in a couple of months. Because what I really want is to do the photography business to support me with acting, so I can do both, which is, and I also need a day job whenever I end up moving, I know, for a while. So I get the photography going. But if I move to Atlanta, I don't I don't know if financially and other things it's still practical going back to New York. I should visit and see. And I think I'm dreading going back and just like becoming this fits of sobs because of missing everything and how rough the last years were with COVID and whatnot. So, but I always just kind of like, oh, I don't want to move to the South. But now that I'm already in the South, it seems like less, you know, less biased. I could maybe check out Atlanta. Everybody says it's very nice, so I think I want to do a little field trip and see. And that it's also more practical because I think there's actually more work in general right now in Atlanta than New York, is what I've been told. The only problem is the minimum wage there is less, and even for like non-union background stuff, it would be less, which because it's a different state, which is annoying.
Is your goal to move to a city, whether it's New York, whether it's Atlanta, without having a job in place or an offer on the table, or are you going to try to apply to jobs online and have interviews before you move to a place before you make that decision?
I'd rather, I mean, I might make the decision to move, but I would, before I picked up and went, I would apply for some kind of day job at least before I actually went there and picked an apartment. Because how am I even going to get an apartment unless I can show verifiable income, you know? I would pick up and go and pick the apartment until I applied and had, okay, yeah, you can start here. How long can you take to get here? And then hopefully everything will come together all at once and not be as terrible and complicated as it probably will be.
Yeah, I would say it'd be best to apply to jobs and start that process, interview process, and then once you get an offer letter, then you can start applying for apartments and finding a place to live in that city. But I think it's given your current income and where you're at, I don't think it's the smartest thing to, hey, let's move to Atlanta, let's move to New York and sign a lease for $1,000 a month or $1,500 a month, whatever it might be, without a job secure in place. Because then you'll get there and then you'll have all these living expenses, and then you're gonna be searching for a job, and that could take weeks, that could take a month or two. You don't really know.
And you're going to do it because they would check so much. They check every little looking cranny for everything when you apply for an apartment. And I wouldn't be able, I, I'd still have to have somebody, and they would probably still have to have a guarantor because my parents don't want to be guarantors with legality things. So that's always been an issue with me living in the city. The source of
Yeah.
stress and money. But I'm hoping Atlanta's not that bad when it comes to guarantors. And if I have an income, that they'll just let me have an apartment.
Yeah, typically they do employment background checks and like proof of employment, so they'll contact your employer. I'm based in Atlanta, so I've had friends and people that I know they've had to go through that process. And so if you don't have a job, it's gonna be very difficult for some of these places to accept you or take you. They're gonna ask for your proof of employment or offer letter or signed offer letter, and they might reach out to your employer or your manager. So definitely something you need to have in place for that. And what's nice right now is you have that flexibility since you're living with your parents, is you don't have a lease that ends in 7 days, or have a lease that get out in 6 months. So if you find a job, you can move to New York City tomorrow, or you can move to Atlanta tomorrow if you had an offer letter. So I think that's probably the proper way to do it is, hey, let's start looking at jobs. If you want to be in those cities, of course, start looking at jobs, applying to those jobs and seeing if you can get interviews. And then if you get a job, maybe you apply stuff in Atlanta, maybe stuff in New York. And once you get one of those, then you do. But also from a New York perspective, I think you need to do a lot more research too on how much stuff is going to cost there. Because if you get a job making $15 an hour in New York City, you're not gonna be able to pay your bills. And you've done that once with the Disney stuff, and I don't think you want to be in that situation again. I don't want you to be in that situation again where you're making minimum wage in New York City and rent there is way too much for your income. So
It's going up too, even though like, and they're like lying about, they're like, oh, we don't have any vacancies, and it's not true. Like half the buildings are empty, but they're saying they are so that they can jack up the prices for people who try to come back into the city. Because so many people moved because of COVID. And I know things are coming back, but yeah.
yeah.
Sorry, Atlanta's more.
I live in Atlanta. I love Atlanta. I think it's a great place to live. I have a lot of friends, family here in this area, and there's a lot of places to live. I think it's a lot cheaper than New York City, and you still live in the South, and it's not as cold as New York. So I'm not a fan of the cold. So I enjoy living in Georgia. One day maybe I'll move to Florida. So
So do you at least get to feel like it's fall? Like, can I
Yes.
wear my winter clothes at least?
Yeah.
I
I
don't get
mean,
to do that in
we
Florida, and I miss that.
we have 4 seasons here. We don't have winter and summer like some places. We have 4 full seasons. So
Okay, that's good. That's another thing I do honestly miss. I like that I have the ocean in Florida, like especially since I didn't live that far from my parents here. So I'd take my one day off, usually I'd come to their beach and go swimming, and that was like my personal therapy to recuperate from the weeks. Like I will miss that and having that and the pool, but like I can't. I'm not gonna time myself because they have good access to something. It's not a reason to stay here when I really miss seasons. And it's ironic because I've always liked the heat and hated the cold. I mean, I've lived in the cold my whole life until I moved here. And imagine walking around the city when it's like 3 degrees and you have to walk to get somewhere. And I've got a faux coat like down to my ankles to try to not to freeze my ass off. It's hard.
I want to dive in just a little bit further because we don't have too much time left. What are your current expenses? Obviously, you're living with your parents right now, so you don't have rent, and you said you have a car payment. What other monthly expenses do you have right now?
I still buy some of my own food. They kind of it depend on like the week and whatnot. And like my mom has been grocery shopping and she bought everything. But then I'll buy stuff from my boss that I'm working for at the market and like certain things that are just for me, like this like mushroom kind of drink and some other things. So I'm still having a fluctuating food bill. I spend about $200 a month to have raw milk shipped to me from Pennsylvania. And I cannot cut that out because I have a very food specific diet and I need that. Um, some of my bigger expenses are food because like eat good food and I
Mhm.
need the healthy food. Like I don't eat crap. I don't spend money randomly on like chips and things. And so it's not like, oh, you can cut that out because I'm not eating those things unless I'm at a party and they're offered and I feel like doing it and every day and stuff. But my other expenses, I have, well, right before I lost my jobs, I was on a cruise and I got a good discount on As You Play with Thomas Kincaid of The Lion King. So I have a monthly payment for that, which is like 150-ish. I know I've sent that over, had
And
that
how many payments
somewhere
you have left on that?
until December.
December.
Because both that and now the credit all the time that is not interest. So I'm paying, you know, the math of how much dividing it by 12 each month would be. So I'm doing that for each month, which is more than the minimum because I think it's their secret goals and they're paying interest and we think the minimum is this, but I know so I'm paying more than the minimum because I want to actually pay it off or properly at the end of the year. So if it's, I just paid it. I just paid things, I guess. So I have what 7-ish payments left on that, and then I'm using the what used to be the insurance policy money to pay the camera, but that's about 400 something a month. So I kind of consider that it's its own expense as I have special money to use for that.
How much did you receive for the insurance? Was it a whole life policy that you cashed out?
I had 30 grand.
30 grand. And how much of that do you have left? Because I know you bought a computer, you traveled with it. How much do you have left in that?
Now that I took 3 grand out to start paying off like the camera stuff, there's 12 something left in that.
Okay, that's that account.
Yeah, because I took from my car payment to buy the car, I took around 10 grand out of that to put towards the car, and then my parents, I took a loan with my parents for the rest of the car, and then I had the car payment that's like 153.97 a month to them, and I think it's around a 10-year or 12-year loan.
Okay.
So
And
my
then what
general payments are like the painting, the car payment, credit card bills. So I need like not with now living with my parents, I need around $500 or $600 to pay my bills, excluding the camera expenses, because that's separate money.
you have 12,000 in that account, why are you I guess a few things. $4,000 camera, we'll start there. I'm not a photographer. I don't know much about photography. I know that's a passion you want to go after. It looks like you bought this camera March 13th of this year. So about 2 months ago now.
Yeah, I spent the first month with them researching what I needed and what was more economical. I could have bought the lenses I could have bought, or even so much more expensive. I even bought the less expensive camera. I asked, my brother is in the film industry and does photography. So I asked him his advice, and I was originally going to get like much older model, and he convinced me that it was a better decision to get the newer technology. I think he was right with that, but it is so different from what I was considering getting, like what I've been using with my boss. But I still got the cheaper of the two cameras. Like that camera was like 2200, and
Mm-hmm.
the camera I had been thinking about getting, which had more pixels essentially, was at like 45 alone before even getting lenses. So by doing that, and it's still enough pixels. Like I talked to people, I went to there's like art shows down here where people are selling their photography on the aluminum classes that I went to do, and selling prints and whatnot. And I asked them what the cameras they were using, and they had older models because this is still what they had with less pixels. So I knew that the one I got would be okay for that. Just need to
And
develop more skills.
so the camera was 2,300. What was the other $2,500 in expenses with that on the Sony charge for 4,800? Lenses.
Yeah, I bought the cheaper telescoping lens that's still good. And then I bought the cheaper but still good like other lens, like it's 20 to 100, 20 to 20 rather.
So I guess I have a couple questions for you on that. I mean, again, I said not a videographer or photographer. I don't know much about cameras. I know they can get expensive. Do you think if you could go back, or I guess what have you learned in the last 2 months with that camera? What action have you taken with that camera to start paying off that $4,800? Like, have you started trying to find business? Have you started trying to reach out to other photographers, videographers in the area that you can work with to get paid from them to make some income, or what are you doing right now with that camera?
Mostly right now, I was been taking photos, learning how to use it, just learning the editing. I came into a whole problem with trying to edit. My brother suggested to use Lightroom, which I've been doing. But there's a difference between like Lightroom and Lightroom Classic. And if you just use the regular Lightroom, you have to pay more, you have more storage at the photos. I'm like, okay, if I use Lightroom Classic, I don't have to do that. I only pay like this small monthly fee to have access to everything. But then when you do that, you have to have enough space on the hard drive, like on your computer hard drive, not a separate hard drive to even edit the photos. And I was getting pretty close as it was with my computer. And I'm like, great, now I know what I'm really gonna need to do is buy a whole new computer. But thank God that I'm with my mom. She needed a new computer anyway because her laptop was like possessed. Like its keyboard was stopped working. It was a whole thing for months. So she was getting a new computer anyway, which is what I'm now talking to you on. I'm like, okay, while I'm here at least and save more money, I can use her computer to help me with that and not put all the photos on at once, and do it sporadically. And she'll have plenty of space so the computer won't freeze up. I can start moving them on to my hard drives to save my finished products and figure out what I can actually sell. And I've learned a lot just in what I'm physically doing in the last month so far. Like I brought it also to Philly when we went up for Easter and started seeing what it was like. And my friend I was staying with, I didn't even know used to do photography. So he was showing me some stuff, which was great. My mom's friend just gave me a really old tripod, which I need to figure out how to use with the camera. So I want to take some really good landscape shots. I'm going to need a tripod to do that. But I know I have to take off the bottom thing they use with the handle to get that on there. So it's like a whole process. My friend actually helped me get the thing on it on the camera in the first place. So I have to learn how to take that off.
Yeah.
But
So
I know I need a portfolio to do that. So part of that is what I've been taking now, so I can build a portfolio for them to look at, so they'll have a reason to hire me. Like old boss did say he'd still give me a recommendation for at least the photography. I should get recommendation for more than that, I think. But I know he was happy with the photos, so if they call him for a reference for that, I can get that there. The only problem with that is unless they let me back into the office to get copies of the raw photos from my old job, I only have access to what's online, and what's online are photos that were, a lot of them are distorted, which nobody even noticed throughout the whole year. Like, we noticed it was starting to happen, but I don't think they realized it had been happening for a long time before. Like, it's a whole thing. Basically, I can't get good looking photos from what I took. That's because of the JPEGs that are online, some of the better products.
Yeah.
Like, the pixels are distorted, and it's really frustrating. I was trying to do that one day and collect stuff in there to start being able for it.
So what's your game plan? What's your timeline to start making money with the photography stuff?
Well, I want to be, that's kind of around the time I'm going to be wanting to be out of my parents, which is by August, July to August. To start making the plan of being out. I need to at least have the idea and to start the process of getting out by July. So I'd like to start at least being able to start selling some of my work online, so I have some kind of income from that. And then I don't know where the seasons are, like, not those kind of seasons, like marketing seasons in Atlanta are, if I do move there. Because the season in Florida is done now with those shows, pretty much.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm hoping that in Atlanta they're there, or if not, I'll travel to wherever they are now that I have a car. Now the thing is, each show is probably going to cost me about $1,000 to do between traveling, renting the tent, and the cost of submitting for them. Although I might even be kidding myself in that the timeline you have to apply for these shows, like, that might not even be an option for a year. I don't know, but I can sell the big works.
So you're saying art shows for you to go set up a tent at an art show and travel to, you're gonna spend $1,000 on those if you were to do that
Per show in
for sure.
general,
Oh, wow.
aside from having the cost of producing the images.
You need to be having your photography business very far along. Is okay. Let's justify $1,000 to go travel and sell work at this event.
Yeah, which is why, like, where I want to move to, if now that COVID, some restrictions stuff is down, that I can go back to acting more. I know that's still what I really want, but I want to do both. So I want to pick where I move to be for that. Because if I weren't doing that, I might stay here just because there's no income tax for the state, and that's easier for, having a whole business. But if I weren't doing that, I'd stay here and find a photography job that would be more lasting to build it up here. But since I want to move, like, maybe I can find a photography job also in Atlanta. I don't know.
Couple of things to look at here is one, you need to find ways to make money so you can move out of your parents. Said your goal is to do that by the end of August. And right now you're only making a couple $100s on the acting stuff a month and then the market. Why don't you either try to find a photography job in Florida for right now that you can continue to work at for the next few months, whether it's working underneath a photography business and learning from them, figuring out how they edit, and learn from them, or applying for other opportunities. But I think that's something that could help, one, put your camera to use that you just purchased, and two, learn from people that will help you accelerate your learning a lot quicker, to build your portfolio, to build your understanding of the industry, to make connections in there. Because I know photography is not an easy business. I know it's not easy to get clients, find clients, sell stuff online, whether you're a wedding photographer, whether you're just doing portraits. I mean, it's not cheap to start and not easy. And I feel like doing it on your own is going to be a lot harder to do that versus, hey, let's go find someone that you can make money on under, and you can learn from them while you're living with your parents, so you don't have those living expenses. But right now, moving to Atlanta, moving to New York, moving to any city with only your couple $100s a month from acting and no income on the photography, you're going to be spending a lot more money than you're making that month, especially with acting being up and down roller coaster of when gigs are available, when you get a new gig. So I personally think that's what I would do if you want to pursue photography and you want to pursue acting. Be looking for opportunities with photography that you can go work and learn from other people.
I would like, I've been craving, like, a mentor, And since my funds are tight, I've been using more YouTube, and I haven't, gone out to pay for classes.
What if you reach out to local photographers in the area, whether the beach photographers, whether wedding photographers, and say, hey, I'll come shoot for you for $10 an hour, $15 an hour, or even free, and do one or two shoots with them for free just to learn from them and start building that. After you do a shoot or two for free, then you say, okay, hey, I'd love to work with you more. Like, is there a pay structure you could figure out? Or maybe they need an extra photographer on set with them for those weddings, for those portrait things, and then you start making money from that. Have you tried that route at all? Instead of going, you don't need to necessarily pay for classes, but you find businesses and say, hey, I'm more about photography. I'd love to come work for you for free for an event or two. What it look like? I mean, right now you're in a good spot where you don't have living expenses, you don't have rent to pay for, so you can afford, okay, a Saturday or Sunday, let's go and shoot for someone for free and really learn, get into the industry and start learning a lot more.
Yeah, I haven't thought about finding like single local photographers. I was only thinking about like businesses. And the sad thing is, I briefly knew somebody who's a photographer, but not, and I went, no. So I've been very annoyed. I've been thinking about this last couple of months, like, man, if that guy had just not disappeared, I could have at least stayed friends and now learned a lot from this person. Yeah, if I could I hadn't thought about reaching out to people I didn't know.
Yeah, reach out on Instagram, reach out via email, put together a portfolio of, hey, this is some of my work, previous work, this is my background. I'm looking to learn in the photography industry. I'd love to come shadow you and be a second shooter in an upcoming shoot that you have. I'll do it for free for a couple hours, whatever, and just see if you get responses that way. And you can also try the route of, hey, I'm looking to do this and I'll do it for a cheap rate so you can make some money doing it too. But I think that's a route that in an industry that you don't know many people, don't have that many connections. How can you learn, and how can you learn the editing flow, tools, how to get clients, and just you could become a second shooter in a lot of their shoots. So especially, I mean, right now, if you want to pursue acting, you want to pursue photography, those are both very difficult industries to make it in by yourself. You need to have another job too on top of that, because acting and photography aren't paying the bills if you want to move out on your own right now. So
Yeah, I'm hoping I get that restaurant job that I applied, like the interview for a start at least. It could be good to get some money in the bank.
And that's something. If you, I mean, continue to find other restaurants or other jobs you can do, whether it's a hostess or retail, and start with that. And then on the weekends, nights and weekends, or I guess if you're working at a restaurant, you're probably working nights. But during the day, if you're working at restaurants, figure out the photography stuff, reaching out to people, watching videos, learning, doing the acting gigs. And then on weekends, especially, okay, hey, do these people have shoots on Friday and Saturday nights that you can go and do, or Saturday during the day, Sunday during the day, and be a second hand to learn from them? And then start reaching out to people too and say, hey, are you looking for extra shooters with your photography, and see if you can make money doing it that way. But I think that's my biggest concern right now is, I mean, you spent $5,000 on a camera 2 months ago and you don't really have a plan to make money right now with it. It's more, hey, let's learn, let's build a portfolio, and let's not try to monetize or learn from other people. Learning on yourself is going to take a lot more time and be a lot more difficult. And you got $400, $500 a month credit card payment that you're paying on it. You need to figure out ways to make that money, build that portfolio, whether it's on other people's time or dime or with their clients, to get that experience and just to help accelerate you a lot quicker. Which I do have another question too, is, I mean, when it comes to the two credit card bills you have right now, one's a $4,000 balance on the camera and the other's $1,300. What's stopping you of just paying those off, since you have the cash in your Wells Fargo account and your investment account, or I guess the cash out account that you have with from the insurance policy?
Because I want to be able to have a buffer, and that might be what I need to use for like the shows, and to start making product to actually ship out if I get the photography going. So if I don't have money, that's where I want it to come from for that, and not just as long as I'm making enough money to pay off, because there's no interest on either of those credit cards. So it doesn't hurt me by having it there. I have the ability to slowly pay it off.
There's not interest, and I wouldn't say it's the worst decision in the world to leave those, but also I think at the same time, being $6,000 in credit card debt also is not a good feeling to have, because you have $600 a month in payments that you have tied to you. And I'm personally pro paying credit cards off, no matter what the interest is, whether it's 0 or it's 30% where they are right now, because also if you leave that balance on, you pay the minimum payments, and interest starts accruing a few months from now, or another unexpected expense comes up, or you start justifying, okay, I'm going to spend $1,000 on X, Y, and Z when you don't have that money, then it's going to start continuing to build. So I'm pro paying credit cards off every single month, whether the interest is 0 or it's 25%, because that way you don't have a $500 a month payment coming out to pay your camera off every month, or $150 towards the other purchase you had. So,
well, I do that with my Wells Fargo one. I pay the statement every time. Now that, I do that now. The reason and the Wells Fargo one was really high because I kept having my credit card information stolen. I'm pretty sure my laptop got hacked. And I think I may have fixed that problem. So then they were also when they're not asking me for the bill. That thing was, but generally I pay off the Wells Fargo, which is the real normal expenses, living expenses outside of those specific items. I pay off every month, so I don't let that accumulate. But I don't know, because I don't think about the other thing as being debt. I'm not using money I'm making for the camera one. I'm specifically using the Merrill Lynch money.
Yeah, and understand. I mean, you have the cash there, but at the same time, it is inherently credit card debt when you carry a balance month over month, whether it is interest free or has 20% interest. Same with a car loan. If you have a car loan that's $10,000, but it's 0% for the first 12 months, it's still $10,000 that you owe the dealership. That is debt that you owe to them. So you do have the cash in your Merrill Lynch account, but it's still debt that you owe these different credit cards for purchases that you had, since you didn't pay the cash, pay cash for it when you bought it. So
it just doesn't see the logic in that at all. As long as I don't let it hurt my psyche, because it's not actually hurting me to have it there. As long as I have the money to pay it off.
And that's where if you go the route of leaving it with 0%, you just have to make sure that you have that money set aside. And you don't spend another $12,000 on, let's go buy another car, another fancier camera, and then you get yourself in a hole.
But I might need it to do the shows.
Can you?
And then it's the product, because right now I don't have the kind of money to start the business without that.
Well, I would challenge you.
That's why I bought the camera from this place, because I could do this credit card and not have to pay insurance on it.
Where I would challenge you in terms of the shows is not spending $1,000 on a show until you're making money from the photography. Like right now, without having.
That's how I'm going to make the money from it, aside from online. I mean, I want to do that first, since before I move, is to start making money online by selling because I'm doing wildlife and landscape. So it's more art and less gigs, what I'm trying to do with my brand of photography. Yeah. So that's selling it as art. And the markets for that are either online or in places. So I can start online because that will be cheaper. I'm doing a show, which is why I want to start with that to get out.
And I get that too. Like your passion is doing the art and selling that, whether it's at shows or online. But from a risk perspective and from a capital investment perspective, if you are going to go work with other photographers and get paid for it, whether it's doing weddings, whether it's doing portrait shoots, it might not be your passion to do it, but you're not paying $1,000, $2,000 to go enter a show that you might not sell anything. You're going to get paid for your time to shoot this and edit it for different individuals. So I think that's a much more conservative route to go, and a lot less capital intensive route. And for you to learn a lot more along the way is, okay, if I go do wedding shoots or go do other photography shoots underneath these other photographers, one, I'll get paid for it, unless you do the first couple free so you can learn. But after that, you'll start getting paid for it. And two, you can then start rolling those funds into other opportunities that are more where your passions lie. But if you try to just pursue your passions without making any money, it can go two ways. You can make money, which is obviously the best case scenario. But then you can also have the situation where you pay $1,000 to go to a show, spend another $500 on material for that too. You're $1,500 in that show, and you might not make your money back. Versus if you're going to work for other photographers to do those types of personal shoots, that obviously is not your end goal. You're at least making money doing that if you're charging people a flat rate for those shoots. So,
but I don't see that as, I couldn't imagine that being able to actually support to fund the business though and do the shows. That would, I thought that'd be more in addition to day jobs, funding my expenses and bills, especially once I'm living on my own again. And that'll be enough to cover that. But then I won't necessarily be making enough money to still fund the business, which is why I want to have that in the Merrill Lynch account. if I'm like an assistant making minimum wage with these people too, still, or and for free to start off with.
It's not going to fund the business immediately. And again, I think you need to have more tangible experience under your belt before you start spending thousands of dollars on shows.
Oh, I agree with that. Yeah, that's why I'm not going to do that immediately
Okay.
because I'm not ready for that at all. No, no, no. That's just in.
That's a long-term goal.
Yeah, I was hoping to do it faster originally, and I realized that's completely not going to happen, especially with where things are going right now. But I'd have to be some kind of stable for me to then start doing a show, and not just stable, but stable in my craft to an extent. So I'm not looking to jump into it.
I think what would be great for you, and I think you can do well with photography if you learn and adapt and grow. I think getting a sustainable full-time job, whether it's in Florida or wherever it might be, that's paying you a monthly income that you can then start learning more photography on the side, do your acting stuff to build that up and be in a spot where you can move out in a few months out of your parents and have your own place and then start investing what you're making, what you're saving to then build your photography business on top of it. But don't get too caught up either in the perfect name for photography. I mean, you can be called Mary Kate Photography right now, and you can run with that name. And then once you come up with a perfect name down the line, you can do it. But that shouldn't hold you back from, okay, let's go find clients. Let's go find different gigs that I can get paid for photography wise and start making money from it. So
I know it's a lot easier when you're doing gig with it as opposed to selling it as art.
it is. Art is not easy. Art is not easy. I don't know much about it, but I know gigs are easier to make money. Gigs are going to be a lot easier for you to make money in the short term than art is going to be. So
Yeah, but my friend had the idea of there's a school that does some acting classes down here, and she gave me the idea of going down and just seeing if everybody needs to get headshots and start targeting them for that. You know, anything, just put like a flyer or something and sneak around.
makes sense. But well, Mary Kate, really appreciate your time today. I know we went over a little bit, so our projected shooting time, but really do appreciate your time today and just diving into where you're at, where you've been, living in New York City to now living in Florida, and excited to see what you do with photography business, and hope that you learned something from this show and enjoyed the conversation, learning from you, and hopefully plan in front of you to go get a full-time job and start building this acting and photography career on the side, and for you to move out and move on your own and decide where you want to live after that. But really do appreciate your time today.
Thank you very much. It's been great.
Awesome. Thanks, Mary Kate. Thanks for joining the interview with Mary Kate today. I just got off the call with her, and she had a final question with me, just asking where she should be investing money right now, what's safe investments with all the banks failing. And what I told her, frankly, was don't worry about investing right now. You're not making enough money to be able to invest, or should be focused on investing. She's making a couple $100s a month from the market job and a couple $100s a month from the acting jobs. $1,000 a month, we'll call it ballpark. And that's not enough money to live off of. That's not enough money for rent, for food, for her car payment, for everything else in between. So investing should not be at the forefront of her mind right now. Her mind should be, okay, how can I get a full-time job to live sustainably, to be able to live on my own, to be able to pay for everything, to be able to pay off this camera, to pay off this other credit card debt. And that's what I told her. Focus on making money right now. Once you start making enough money that you can be saving $500, couple $100 a month, then okay, $200, $300. Okay, where do I want to invest that? Do I want to reinvest that back into my business, or do I want to invest that into index funds or mutual funds? And don't worry about right now, how do I invest when I'm not making enough money to live off of? So hopefully that's a good lesson for anyone out there. Don't focus on investing until you pay off your debts and you have an emergency fund in place, and you then can start be saving money every single month. So, and also another controversial thing that everyone has different opinions on is her credit card debt. It is 0% interest till the end of this year. And a lot of people view that as that's okay to do. And it really depends. It depends on your risk tolerance, depends on your financial literacy and education. And I'm personally a proponent of, when you get credit cards, if you make charges on them, pay them off every single month, no matter the interest rate. It's just not something you want over your head, and it's not something you want coming out of your bank account every single month. So if you can't pay cash for it, don't buy it. Live below your means, and focus on increasing your income. So thanks y'all for joining today. Hopefully it was a good conversation with Mary Kate, and hopefully you can learn something from it. If you want to be on the show, if you want to apply, drop me an email. The email's in the description, and really appreciate you watching, all the support, and make sure you like and subscribe. Thank y'all for coming.